We wanted to remember Bob here on campus. He said, well, he thought that was a great idea. And after I hung up talking to him, I thought, you know what? If you ask the busiest person you know to do something, they'll say yes. If you ask somebody who's not doing anything, they hem and haw and they have to think of an excuse. But Greg has been here so many times, and he's just been a great asset to LSS because he's been here many times interviewing important people, and here I am.
I love that start, you know. Hi, I'm Cindy Holt, and you're not, you know.
Yeah. But anyhow, I also want to be sure to give a warm welcome to Mary Ann, Bob's wife of over 60 years, his their granddaughter, I know your name. Kelly is plain as mine. Their daughter, Debbie Anderson, is here, and their son, Bob. And for Mary Ann, this is her first outing after a terrible fall that she had. In fact, I think it was on Bob's birthday, because I was coming over with a card for Mary Ann for Bob. And so she was in the hospital for many weeks and in rehab, and she still is having rehab at home. So we're so thankful that you could be here tonight, Mary Ann. And her family. And I think Tom and his wife are away on a trip, so they couldn't be here. So anyhow, now I don't know what I have on my notes, but I know when I talked to Greg, he said he thought it would be great if people brought their own reflections of Bob. And I have one of Bob and Mary Ann. We moved out, I don't need these, I'm not reading anything now, thanks to you. But anyhow, we moved down to LSS 10 years ago, and when we came home from Florida, the first thing we did was come down to see what our apartment was looking like. And we were in there, and pretty soon there was a knock on the door, and I opened it, and it was Bob and Mary Ann. And we did not know them at all. But within minutes, we grew to love both of them very much, and we had a deep, deep friendship. And it was interesting because we would go for breakfast or lunch sometimes, and if Bob drove, we always end up in Faulkner. Somehow, it doesn't matter where we were, we ended up driving around Faulkner, driving past all these homes that so-and-so lived, and so-and-so lived, and so-and-so lived. And then I remember one day, and Mary Ann, how she laughed. We were laughing in the back seat. He said, see that hill there? There's where my old girlfriend lived, and I used to walk up that hill in all kinds of weather. But anyhow, they were
Until that hill got too slippery.
Nothing stopped Bob.
We all have that story.
Well, then he met Mary Ann,
That's
that hill, yeah. But anyhow, Bob had a nickname for me. Every time he called me, hi, Sin. How are you doing today, Sin? Well, my name is Cindy, C-I-N-D-Y, and I hope he meant C-I-N and not S-I-N. However, only Bob knows. So anyhow, I will be glad to give the...
Let's give it to your husband first.
Oh, boy.
Come on.
Dick,
come up.
Bob and I became very good friends. We pulled together, talked about a lot of things. We enjoyed our time together. I miss him, so does everybody else miss him. Bob, I never heard Bob ever say anything bad about anybody. And everybody was his friend. And
How do you feel about the Yankees?
I think they're great, but they just had a bad year.
How did Bob feel about the Yankees?
Well, they're just not Cleveland, that's all. Bob was a Cleveland fan all the way. Football, baseball, and when you went into their apartment, you didn't have to wonder what it was all about. He had his own room there, his man cave. In that man cave, he had all the credentials.
So what's your best story about Bob? We just heard about your wife talking about driving around Faulkner and looking at the hills and girlfriends up there. And what's your best story about Bob?
Oh boy.
Probably when the Indians beat the Yankees.
Well, you could always tell when the Indians won because he always had a smile on his face. And if they lost, you didn't expect much. But he was a true friend and a true fan, and it started early in life that he had this concern. I know when he was working with the kids, Major League Football, I don't know about baseball, but I remember him talking about his big thing was being able to talk to the kids, and if they had problems, Bob went out of his way to try to help them, and I thought that was great.
True, and I'll just add to that I was one of those folks at the Southside Blue Devils who played with his sons there, and he did take an active interest in many of those who didn't have rides. Dads couldn't get them to the kids of the game, and he would pick them up. He would go way out of his way to be their friends, aside from being coach, mentor, and that went on. That relationship, which was for kids in their 10 through 13-year-old range, went on well beyond high school and much later in life. So he really kept a very warm, paternalistic instinct with all the folks he coached, and I was one of those in that group.
Yeah, no, I think he was probably second father to an awful lot of kids.
Yeah. We're going to call Scott Forsberg up now. Scott's going to tell us, because I looked around and he looked like he was the youngest person here. This is Scott Forsberg. Scott played with VFW Little League, and he told me he was the best Little League ball player ever.
Yeah. Greg and I were on the same team. I grew up in Allen Park, so we knew Mr. Benson or Mr. B, and that friendship carried on into adult life. He was really involved with the Southside Blue Devils midget football, and then the Little League baseball also. But then in adulthood, like we come home after going away to college, and there's Mr. B sitting there watching a church softball game or a Westburg Electric. Greg and I played on Westburg Electric slow pitch softball, and he just enjoyed coming to even those games and maintained that friendship with us, years later. And the first house that my wife and I had was on Allendale, about 2 houses up from where Greg grew up, and who helped me when we were remodeling our basement, and he helped build the furnace ducts so that, we had heat in the basement. Those are the kind of things, and I knew him from midget football, and there he is helping me as an adult. And then the other things I also remember about Bob was at every high school basketball game, standing up there in the corner there and greeting us former midget football players. He was just a great, great guy.
Debbie, Bob's daughter's got a statement and a story, so Debbie, you want to come up?
My dad, he called me doll, so we're talking about words here.
I want to put the mic a little bit closer.
Oh, I'm
there.
sorry.
Thank you.
He called me doll my whole life. I didn't know where to start about my great dad, so I thought words. He loved word games, crosswords, sometimes made up his own words and songs. If anybody knows this special word, I never say it right, but maybe my brother could say it. Oskalavich was one of them. And these are some words that came to me in no special order from my heart. Husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, son, brother, and uncle. Kind, compassionate, handsome, creative, helpful, great dancer, funny, modest, grateful, good listener, cheerful, hard worker, athlete, joyful, supportive, artistic, smart, loving, teacher, private, witty, respectful, veteran. Dad, I love you very much. I will never forget you. How could I? You are part of who I am. Your doll, your daughter, Debbie.
Very good.
That still isn't enough.
We heard a lot about his, your dad, certainly attending to coaching Major League Football, Little League, Babe Ruth, basketball games, which are all sort of male sports. Did he keep track of what you did?
He did. Of course, there weren't any sports for women or girls, but he taught me how to keep score at the baseball games.
That's critical for every woman to know that.
So you know what number each base is, and different things like that. He also attended all of my children's activities, they were all swimmers and tennis players, and he was at every one of those as they were growing up, before the girls started. So, like you said, he was at that swim meet in that same high school. Your sister-in-law there officiating, and we just had a special. He always told me I could be a great athlete, but there wasn't a lot of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the cheerleader in junior high, and for the Southside Blue Devils, I don't know if maybe I was gone by the time you got on the team. And I was with the team that went to Florida.
Did you really? Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
My Uncle Les and, yeah.
There's Les James, by the way.
Les James.
Yeah.
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 So I just adore my dad after my husband passed away. He was so supportive. He was so good to my kids. He was there for the boys' things, and he'd call me quite a bit that first year. He wasn't much of a talker on the phone. And he'd just say, "How are you doing today, doll?" And I don't know what I said, either terrible or okay, and he'd say, "I'm proud of you." Meant a lot. So I had a dad that was fantastic for 66 years. I'm very grateful for that.
We're not going to ask you your age. We won't do that.
Well, I just gave it.
That would be inappropriate for me to do that at this point. Let's have Kelly, because Kelly got the start. Thank you. That was very good. Deb. Everybody's on the spot today. So.
I'm Kelly Gower. I'm the oldest granddaughter. So my grandma and grandpa always would tell me I'm the most special, but not to tell the other grandchildren. So I was fortunate enough to get to spend the most time with my grandpa. And I don't know, I just don't know where to start. He was just meant so much to me. And
how about your nickname?
Oh yeah, my nickname was Kelly Burger. And I don't know where it started, but that was his name for me. But like my mom said, he was at all my swim meets. He was just so supportive in so many ways and was a great role model for me. And I'm fortunate that my boys got to spend time with him, and they loved him just like a grandpa. And he would attend their soccer games and just carry on the tradition of being a big fan of them as well and cheering them on. But he meant a lot to them as well, and they miss him.
Did his interest in all things Cleveland, Browns, Indians, I assume even the Cavaliers, was that transmitted to you guys?
No. No, we're Bills fans.
Oh, that's okay.
No, but we do have some memorabilia from him. But no, didn't transcend over.
Your mother mentioned a word that I just got a piece of that your grandfather said. What was that again?
Osclovich.
What was that?
Oh, Osclovich.
What is that?
It's a word that he made up that would be like the equivalent of like cheers or
Oh, so Nostrovia, or
just
school.
made it
Yeah,
up.
okay.
And that was his motto.
So it wasn't one of those root and scrutin, Swedish things.
Don't know the roots of it, no.
That's terrific. Hey, Bob, you want to say a word or two? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Little things that people might not know about my dad. To me,
Hey, Bob.
he was ahead of his time. He was kind of the first social worker in this town. He cared about minorities, children. There was no color to him. He didn't care. There was no bigotry with him. He, for example, the Morales boys, some of the first Puerto Rican families in Jamestown are great friends to this day. Everybody was equal. Everybody was my dad's son in this town, or daughter, as Scott and Greg can say, and I think that's forgotten sometimes. I think you want to be remembered for that more than anything else. That's all.
He mainly did make an effort. We had in the area, whether it was Puerto Ricans, Italians, and Bob, of course, was, I don't know, what is it, Swedish? And,
Swedish.
yeah, we had blacks on this a team before it was really, and there was no distinction in his mind's eye. You're all athletes. We're all trying to do the same thing, and yet he knew that some folks came from a little bit more difficult situations, and he tried to fill in voids without, taking over. I mean, you're mindful of the family situation, but that was your dad. He was amazing that way.
Right, he was. And I also wanted to add that, behind every great man is a great woman. And my mother was always kind of behind the scenes and stuff. But he wouldn't have been himself without her. I just wanted to say that. So.
Well, your mother was just telling me that when they woke up in the morning, and this is really terrific statement. Bob would come down and say every day, "What are we doing today?"
Right.
Not "What are you doing?" or here's what I am doing, which is kind of rare. And I think that's just a terrific testament to the relationship that your mom and dad had, and you saw that throughout. Certainly, as we were growing up, they were
Right.
kind of glove in hand.
Yeah, things are different in those days. 67 years, I believe. And so it's pretty amazing. But that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you. Jim, you got something to say, don't you? About everything. Go ahead. Come on.
And I can remember Bob way back when he played basketball. Yeah, I think it was for the Vikings. Am I right? With Zer Faulkner and Bill Present in that group. And that was quite a basketball team at that time. Just about professional. Because they would play the Harlem Globetrotters. And I remember I was up at the Y, because they played up at the Y in the little bandbox up there. And Spiro Bello had me as the timekeeper up there. So I was keep watching the time, this kind of thing. In Jamestown, the Vikings were going ahead. And I got so excited and I forgot to stop the clock at certain times, so the clock was running over. But I do remember that. They were fantastic, that basketball team. Really, I can't remember the other players on it, but there was quite a few. Ariane probably remembers some of them then too.
Eric Lundgren, I think, played.
Yeah. And they were good. They were really good. And they traveled all over. But I remember Bill Present, as I say, Zer Faulkner, and Bob in that group. It was good.
What was he like on campus here?
I didn't really, see, I've only been here 3 years. So I really didn't get a chance to see him that or talk to him that much other than downstairs in the pool hall.
Talk about
And-
those pool hall games.
Oh, and he was always wearing a Cleveland hat. Always wearing a Cleveland hat. But a beautiful, a wonderful man. Wonderful man. You couldn't say anything bad about Bob. I don't think anyone ever could.
Was he any good as a pool player?
Oh, yes. Yes, he was. Yes, I can attest. I'm not good at all, by no means. And, yes, he's pretty good. He's pretty good. But as I say, that was the only thing I noticed over here with all the football and that stuff. But I thought, gee, there was nothing about the Vikings in there. And I thought, that was like in, well, when was that? Late 40s, I would guess. Probably like 46, 47. In that group, everybody got out of the service, and this group got together to play basketball. And that, yeah, and I was just a young kid going up to the Y at that time.
Jeanette, I know you have a lot to say. So Bob was part of your world, so come on up.
Greg, what would you like to ask?
Well, he lived in your complex.
Yes.
And talk about living with
Well-
the Bensons.
Well, you know, Bob, I think Bob we knew some of the other folks already from previous years in the building, but Bob and Mary Ann we did not know. But one day when we were there, I don't even know if we officially had moved in, Bob came and knocked on the door and says, "Greetings, neighbors. You know, we were so happy that you're going to be moving in," and so on and so forth. And he did, and Bob, you know, he's a very distinguished, good-looking man, and very kind man. And I can remember sometimes we would be discussing world events or local things that happened and all that. And Bob, after a while, he'd shrug and he'd say, "What are you going to do?" You know, I mean, that was Bob. And when we went away, Bob was always so good about collecting our mail and our newspaper. Well, he had a 90th birthday, and I thought, you know, better make it a little easy for Bob. So I didn't ask him to collect the newspaper. I had asked my friend Mary Lou Scully to collect our mail and whatever else. And I says, and if you just pick up the newspaper too, that would be great. Well, when I got back, there were no newspapers in the living room where I had left a bag. And I said, well, so I asked Mary Lou, I called her up, I said, "Where's my newspapers?" And she said, "I don't know." She says, every morning when I'd come there, she says, it was gone. And I said, then I thought, I bet you. So I went down in our storage area downstairs, and sure enough, there Bob had loyally put them in the bag like he used to and all that. Even though I hadn't asked him to do it, he's such a very honest, loyal man, he just felt it was his responsibility. And that was Bob. He was a good man. Well, you couldn't find a better man than Bob.
Well, it was nice of him to reach out to you, especially Jeanette, because you married a Swede, and you're,
Right.
you know, the Paranellas, and all of a sudden there's
Well, like
Jeanette.
you said, he's not prejudiced.
Just another example, Bob. I'm telling you. That's why
He was a great man. We love Bob.
Okay.
Really. We truly miss him. But that's the way it is.
Who else has a comment or two?
Osklovich is his favorite word, I think, and I asked him one time how you came about doing that, and he says, "I don't know. I guess I made it up." But then, Mary Ann, I think you told me that it didn't mean anything, did it?
No, I meant you are a good person.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Oh, well, he was talking to me then, apparently. Bob was a lot of fun. He was always a good sport. And when we had this, and this lady friend jumped out of the box, and the looks on his face, if you haven't seen this, take a look at it before you leave, because I think it's part of his personality. Personality is so important in life. And Bob had one. There's so many times when he just fit into any crowd in any situation, and that's, I think, what I remember most of Bob. He was just, like everybody else has said, a fine man. Somebody you'd go to sleep at night maybe even thinking about him. And he was a good friend. If you ever needed a tool, he had every tool in the book, I think, anyway. So he was always available to us. We went to lunches together and dinners and with Mary Ann and Bob, and always enjoyed it. And the one thing that was always impressive, I thought, he would show up, or he would be with us at lunch, and all of a sudden someone like this friend of his that just spoke, would come, "Oh, Bob, I haven't seen you lately. Remember I used to play for the Little League," or whatever it was. And it happened not once, but there were a lot of people which indicated how active he was in sports and how much he enjoyed sports. He had Cleveland Browns everywhere you looked. That's the way he was, and I'll always remember him for those things.
What was his professional career? What did he do?
He worked for Sanford Sprinkler, is that correct? What was it? Sprint-Shorn. He was a sheet metal person and did a lot of that type of work. And I'm sure he was dedicated to that job as much as he was dedicated to his family. Debbie?
Ray, can I ask you?
Sure.
Who's coming out of the cave?
Who's the
Would the lady who jumped out of the cave please stand up? Would the lady who jumped, I may have to grab that lady, but I guess if she looks like this, come on.
Oh, I look like that.
Well, when we moved into 140, my husband and I knew...
By the way, for the tape, who are you?
I'm Aurora Bondi.
Thank you, Laura.
And when we moved in, my husband and I knew just about everybody in that building, but we did not know, I did not know the Bensons at all, but Jerry did know Bob. And he said to me that he went to school with Bob's brother. And when we first moved in, Jeanette and Gordy Carlson were gracious enough to have a party, just a get-together for everybody in the building so that they could meet us. And that's when the first time I met Bob. And after just a very few days, every time Bob saw me, he would say, "Here's my pretty lady." He'd say that whether we were in the hall or in the basement or anywhere. And he was just a very, very kind person. And I was very, very glad to have met him.
So because he said what he said, you always thought him as a very honest person, right?
I don't know about that, but he certainly was a very, very kind person. You couldn't say anything bad about him. And the other thing, whenever he went, his son Tom took him very often to the Bonaventure basketball games. And he knew that both of my daughters had graduated from Bonaventure and two of my grandchildren had. And so every time he'd come home after seeing a game, he would let me know how the game had gone and what they had done. So, and he knew that I was a sports nut. I watched all of sports. So we talked about sports a lot. But I was not aware of how much good he had done when he helped with the other kids, and which just makes me know that he was just an all-around man.
We're going to invite your sidekick who raised their hand too. Come on up.
You're talking to Janice Nelson,
Yes.
and I did not know Bob and Mary Ann when we came to the building. We had lived there, well, my husband passed away, but we had lived there almost 10 years. And one of the few people that came around, and Bob said, "You know about the Cleveland Browns?" And I said, "Yes, I sure do. I got two sons that love the Cleveland Browns." Well, right then and there was a bonding between Janice Nelson and Bob. And Mary Ann is such a sweetheart, and occasionally Bob would say to me, "Boy, I don't know what you'd do without your husband," because he was so wonderful. And I said, "Bob, you just keep going on. I mean, life goes on. And you know, you had a wonderful marriage," and that's the way I feel about Bob and Mary Ann. They were just wonderful people, and Mary Ann's got such a wonderful family, and we go on from here.
Perfect. Now, do you have a story about Bob? I mean, did he have any nicknames for you? I mean, clearly he did for her.
I don't remember that he did.
You can't top what he told her?
No, I can't, I'm sorry. I'd be honored.
Now, who else should we got the Andersons coming up here. Who else that we should be asking who are too shy?
Well, did Gordon come up?
Not yet. Gordon, that would be good. So while the Andersons are preparing, Gordon, why don't you come up?
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Alrighty. Well, I'll start off saying this, that if anybody was a good Boy Scout, Bob was. I don't remember the oath completely, but talk about trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendliest, courteous, kind, cheerful, brave, clean, and reverent. Now, that's the first thing that came up with me. But anyhow, Bob and I had a number of conversations down in the storage area. And, you couldn't find a nicer guy to talk to. He didn't have anything really to say derogatory about anybody. He seemed to like everyone that he met and knew. He was always very helpful. And again, repeating what someone else said here, is that anything he had in his area, in his storage area, was, you could use it, borrow it, do whatever you want. But he was a very pleasant man. It was a privilege to know him, because he was very nice, and pleasant, and a wonderful guy.
By the way, Mary Ann's leaving. Let's bid her adieu today. Thanks, Mary Ann. So even though you liked the Yankees, you still liked you, huh?
Yeah, he didn't say too much about that to me. I bugged him on Cleveland. I used to tell him I used to go out to the ball game and watch the Yankees beat Cleveland when I was younger, in my 20s. But he didn't say too much about that. He left that alone for some reason or other.
You couldn't bring it out of him. You just
No, he was just going to be a Cleveland fan, and that was it. And that's all that mattered.
Wow, that's unbelievable. That's great. So in the building itself, did you guys have assignments? Did you do you have assignments, like certain people, whatever, are knocking on doors to make sure everybody's okay? Do you?
I don't know too much about that. I know that there are the cards, they little things they put on a doorway that I'm okay in that. But otherwise, that's about all I know about that.
So you're okay. You didn't have anything like that.
Yeah.
So what do you think of Kevin Saff?
Well,
he's our new guy. He's the guy that introduced. Were you paying attention, Gordon?
No, I met him.
Oh, you did?
No,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
I just was surprised at the question.
Well, you shouldn't be.
Yes. No, because I do not make any judgments on anyone I first meet. I wait for quite a while after that before I make my judgments. Now, a lot of people, they judge people on the first time they meet a person. I do not. I wait until I get to know them. Then I'll make the adjustment.
Is that true? Is that true, Jeanette? Does Gordon really hold out for making judgment on people?
Oh, yes.
All right, so what do you think of me?
The only thing I made a quick adjustment on is, judgment on is my wife, who I met a few times and decided I want to marry her.
Oh.
Now that was unusual. But of course, she had. I couldn't find anything wrong with her, so I kept dating her, and not too long. I think I proposed in a short period of time.
Wow. I didn't know where to go after that one. So, the Andersons were. We had a couple of folks that were come on.
Yeah, we got the Andersons.
Yeah, just make stuff up, you know. Yeah, it's just. So you're the exception. When I heard Mary Ann say, "Wasn't it wonderful?" Every morning we'd get together for breakfast and say, "What are we doing?" So you're that guy that says, "I'm telling you, this is what I'm doing," and you take off, right?
We are pretty much a pair anyway. We've been living together and working together and doing everything together for 60-some years. So I guess it was okay if Bob came in, but she can tell you the story about how Bob came down and talked to her. Yeah, not my mouth talk.
Bob was just a real loving guy. He was very, very special, and you just couldn't say anything bad about him. And wherever you saw him, he just always had a hug for you, and just so warm. And I really thought a lot of Bob. And a week or so before he passed away, he came down and he says, "I just want you to know," he said, a little bit about him, and he could express himself. I knew then that he was not feeling well. There was something wrong. But he says, I just want to share that with you. And so I thought that was a very special time. But Bob was always one.
What did he share? About his
What his problem was.
Oh, okay, got it.
And how he was feeling at that time.
Mhm.
And it was like a week later that he passed away.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but he was loads of fun. I mean, every time we have a good building, and we share everybody's birthdays, special birthdays, and things like that. And the picture that Ray was talking about that he brought up here, that was such a fun night because that was his 90th birthday, and we really wanted something special. And so we kind of came up with the idea. Bob always likes a good time, and so what are we going to do? And I remembered Cindy for Halloween way back about 10 years, a few years before that, had come out and in this, well, it's a big shirt, well, you can see it in the picture, of this woman, and it was just darling, and I said, Cindy, how about you wearing this? And we'll get the box. And we had the party down here, and we wheeled up in on this, we've got this huge box, and wheeled it in, and Cindy was inside with us, and we were all sitting around here, and she had a wig on and all, and I don't remember now what it was on the box there, but anyway, and she popped out of the box. He had no idea who it could have been. It was so funny, and the expression on his face was a prize. Yeah, he was. It was a fun night, and just a little thing. Our building always had birthday parties for special birthdays for somebody, so everybody has taken their turn at one time or another and getting together, and we always had such great times. And this is probably, I don't know, it's a cute story. It really is. Many of you, I don't know who remembers Isabel Erickson. Okay, she was in our building also, and one time we were all together, and she's sitting there. Oh, it was I think that was a Halloween party too, because we were sort of dressed up or something. But anyway, she was sitting like this, and he says, "Oh, Isabel, this is Bob." Saying, "I didn't realize you had such pretty legs." And she said, "You did." And up comes her skirt. It was just above her knee, and that was so cute. You would, if you knew her, I mean, she was a very prim and proper lady and just so much fun. But we probably didn't know that side of her, but we really have had a lot of good times in our building and parties and all. So Bob was very special, and we all loved him so much.
That was enough. Yeah. I remember with Jim, Bob playing with Vikings, where I saw them. They were playing over at the Armory. They had a pretty good basketball team. So that's the first I remember of Bob. But I never got anything more with him until he moved down here. We were pool partners for one of the seasons, and he always drove. I didn't have to drive. He always drove. His car was always ready, and he'd always take me all the way home too. He didn't cheat on that. I went with him and I went home with him. So he was quite a guy.
Wait a minute, you played pool as partners for, where did you play?
Downstairs.
Downstairs? Well, where else was he driving? Were you at the Bullfrog? Well, they have a league, they have a pool league up there.
No, we never were good enough to enter that league. We were lucky to win 50-50 or something.
Yeah.
No, but we had a good time with him.
Yeah, so this was just 1 year and then he got another partner?
Yeah, we switched partners every
Okay,
year.
I just wanted to, he didn't dump you or anything like that.
Well, I think he would have.
He had a life to suit him. No.
Yeah. No, he was a good pool player. But everybody that plays pool is a good player down there.
Now, who else should we be asking out here? Right now, there's reticent people who are saying, "Gee, I don't know if I want to talk." Who should we be asking? Yeah.
How about one of the Scullys? They're pretty good at talking.
Okay. So
Jim.
if we ask Jim or Mary Lou or both of them.
Yeah, they can both. We got 2 chairs now, Mary Lou.
3 is one.
If they have, but that's
No, I'm going.
assume they have a friend. Okay.
I think Bob was right. However, we're pretty new here. We've only been here 3 years. However, our apartment is directly across from Bob and Mary Ann's. And when we first got here, of course, they'd be out on their porch and, you know, hi, how are you? And that kind of thing. And then winter came and nobody saw anybody. But I was out pushing snow off the cars one morning, and all I heard is, Jim, hey, Jim. Now, I have no idea where this is coming from. And so I'm looking around, and I happen to look up, and there's Bob up on his porch, standing in the snow. He wanted a picture of me working, apparently. Maybe he wasn't used to that. So anyhow, a few days later, I have this really nice photograph of me pushing snow off the cars, which to this day stands right next to my phone. However, the real thing that I'd like to point out is Bob was such a neat guy, just a neat guy. I remember one day, I used to think I was a pretty tough guy in my day, and we were out there talking about, it was in the fall, and talking about the Jamestown Red Raiders. And he had been to the game the night before. Now, it was not a nice night. It had rained and done everything that we have here in this county. And I'm thinking, why were you at the game? And he said to me, were you at that game? And I went, no, I think I must have been busy. But there was no way in God's world I was going to sit out there in that weather. But he was there the whole game, knew what had happened, who was by name, who had done whatever. And so he was such a personable, nice guy. And I don't remember which birthday it was, but I think it might have been his 90th. We were headed out of town, and we had bought a card for him. And I ran it up to the door, while Mary Lou was packing the car, of course. And
Tough guy.
a tough guy. I was a tough guy. And I ran the card up and just sat it at his door. So 5 minutes later, he's down right next to us, thanking us for this card like it was the greatest thing he'd ever got. But such a nice guy. And in the short time that we were able to know him, I have never met a nicer man. He was super.
Greg, when you're done with this, we should go back and say how many times people said he was such a nice guy.
Yeah.
And there's nothing fits Bob better than that. When I think of Bob, I think of, some of you might know, Jeanette and I played golf quite a bit. And I swear Bob was sitting out on the porch waiting for us to leave. So he'd say, have a good game, you know, play well. And I swear he waited until we came back because he'd be there. Well, how did it go today? How'd you do it? How'd you hit him? Right, Jeanette? Yeah. He was always standing in even now when we keep coming back from golf, I'd look up and hope we'd see him standing there, but he wasn't. But he was just so supportive of everybody. And like we all say, there's nothing you can say about Bob that was bad, and he was just a true gentle man. He truly was. And what a wonderful family he has.
As you look out there, who else should be talking at this point? Who else would like to talk? Anybody?
I think everybody in our building that's here just spoken, so.
Anybody else? My chat? If not, I want to thank everybody for taking the time. This is really quite an incredible event. And to pause and reflect on Bob and Cindy, I'm glad you came up with the idea. And this will be, I'm sure, as we filmed it, and it'll be something for the family to enjoy. So kudos to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.